Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is the first Move Better Monday episode. I thank you guys so much for tuning in here because we're going to be talking about today what I think is probably the most important thing to get started when you want to begin a strength conditioning program or when you're trying to rehab from an injury is how do you find a neutral spine? How do you brace your core? We talk about core all the time. Brace your core, brace your core. What does that even mean? Well, I'd like to go over a couple of tips and drills that I do with people to help them get back to creating a neutral spine. Because we know if we can create stability through the proximal segment of your body, right, this whole thorax, that you're going to be much more ready and in a position to tolerate load, and you'll be able to move better. You'll decrease your risk of injury. And so a couple of things I want you to think about here. Your thorax, your thoracic spine, and your pelvis, if we look at the model here, are connected by your lumbar spine, right? So you have your rib cage, your upper back, your lumbar spine connects down to the pelvis. So what happens, a lot of people, a lot of athletes are very powerful, right? They assume this extended position. And that's great for some sports because it's very explosive. We can generate a lot of power in the position. Glutes, quads, they generate a lot of force. And what happens is that pulls us into this position. But with those same powerful athletes, if you think about pitchers or linemen or gymnasts, that repetitive hyperextension can create stress onto the low back, right? If we're always dumping forward, as we would call it, that stress is hitting them right in the lumbar spine. So how do we maintain that? Well, first, I want you to think about your pelvis as a big glass of water, right? So if you make your hands like this, you're going to think that this is the rim of the glass and it's filled to the brim with water. If that glass tips forward, the water is going to spill out the front. Likewise, if it tips backwards too far, the water is going to spill out the back. So what I want you to do is grab onto your hip bones. It's actually me grabbing right here and here. There's two bones. One's called the ASIS, or next, basically a landmark on your pelvis called the ASIS, and the PSIS. If you grab onto those, you're going to think of your pelvic rim as a big glass of water. So I want you to find what your neutral pelvic position is. If you tilt your pelvis forward to the end, right? So go all the way to the end first, because then you'll know what your range is. You're going to be in this extended position. You probably will feel a little stress through your low back. So how do you get out of that? Well, I don't like this position. I naturally want to tuck my tailbone under to get out, and now my back feels a little better, right? If you do the opposite, where you tuck your tail as far as you can, we call this a posterior pelvic tilt. See how all the way up the chain from my lumbosacral area flexes, my thoracic spine wants to collapse, and I want to bend forward. So where do we find that neutral position? Well, take your hands, and I want you to basically do pelvic tilts in the air. So you're going to shift your pelvis forward and backwards, and it might be good to find a mirror so that you can stand in a profile view, how you doing, and figure out where your neutral spine position is. Now, if you have tight hip flexors or you got tight hamstrings, your position of comfort might be different. But main thing we want to make sure is you're not in this big lordotic curve or hyperextended position, and that your position, you don't feel like you're, hunched over like a little old man. We're going to find a nice position. Second from that, once you get your positioning down, I want you to grab a dowel rod or a broomstick. And now we're going to create some tension through our anterior chain so that you can feel what it feels like to brace or to create what we would think of as a hollow body position. You're going to take this stick here, you're going to jam it into the ground, you're going to put one hand over the other. And then, in that same profile view, I want you to think about where is your neutral spine position. And so for me, it's about right there. Once I find neutral spine, I'm going to then press down as hard as I can into this stick. I'm creating tension. What you should feel is that you get tension all the way through the system, all the way down to your hip flexor, and that's what we would consider a core stabilizing position. You should feel like your abs engaged, feel like your pecs engaged. You even might create some downward position of your scapula here to help stabilize. And so you're pushing down, and I want you to hold for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, release out of it. You come back into it, find your position, okay, about right there. Good, make a little bend in my knees, I'm going to press down, press create tension through the anterior chain. 1, 2, 3, come out of it. A couple things you want to make sure of is as you press down, if you get right into this position, this is your position of comfort, you know that you're probably one of these hyperextenders. Another way that I like to think about this and cue people is if you take your hand and put it right under your rib cage, and you take your hand and put it right at your belt line. If this box, right, your stomach essentially, if that stomach opens up, you know you're extending. If that stomach closes down, you know you're flexing too much. It's a really good cue that when you're doing weightlifting, things like back squats or hip hinging, if you think about this area here, that makes it a lot easier to picture keeping neutral spine. What we'll be going over on Friday here is Functional Friday. Is going to be the first episode is going to be talking about how do you hip hinge properly. And so we need to find that neutral spine position. You need to be able to feel what it feels like to create tension through the anterior chain so that you can brace properly. Thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed this video, click subscribe and we'll be helping you out tomorrow. Hope to see you back then. Thanks.